What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. You guys, Derek and Cody, with you as always. Guys, we wanted to talk about the 2023 season. Quite crazy that 14 hours after the Colts lose a devastating battle against the Houston Texans, ending their 2023 season, which almost had a playoff berth added to it. Here we are now talking about the entirety of the 2023 season and what it has been for Colts fans. Cody, I'm sure that when this video goes up, there's still going to be a lot of people that are still really up in their feelings about how this season ended. And in some ways, you and I are as well, but I think it's important to kind of reminisce on what this season has been like for Indy. I would like to say that I think it was a giant success for Indianapolis and trending in the right direction than what we saw in 2022. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I think it's important to keep perspective, Derek, because let's be honest. Before the season, look where people were expecting this team to finish. USA Today had the team winning 4 games this in 2023, and so there was a lot of people, and even like people who are giving them a little bit more credit, were still like 5 to 6 wins. That was kind of, I think, the preconceived record that people think the Colts were going to have in 2023. And that was with a fully healthy Anthony Richardson, mind you. So I think just looking at the season in whole, the fact that Shane Steichen, who, again, people seem to forget, he is a rookie head coach, so he can make mistakes and he can learn and he can grow as a coach. I thought he had a good year. He had a really good year considering all the circumstances that he faced. And so, yeah, obviously you want to make the playoffs. The way that the season ended was so abrupt and just so caught everybody off guard with how, we're feeling good. The Colts were driving. They needed a touchdown to win. And then, boom, they can't convert on a routine play. And it's like, that's it. That's the season. And so, yeah, you're right. People have a right to be upset about this, and we are as well. Still, it still stings. When you look at it from a great, just a completely, outside perspective, where this team was expected to be, where this team ended, I think you look at it and you say, hey, this team was one play away, 20 yards away from being in the playoffs. That's crazy that this team was at that point, considering where the expectations were. And also, I'm sure we'll talk about, all the adversity that they had to face this year with a lot of guys that have been key players for this organization over the last 4 to 5 years who didn't play, who weren't a part of this team this year. So I think overall, when you look at it, while the season did end very disappointingly, you did have a winning record, and that's something that nobody really expected this team to have here in year number 1 under Shane Steichen, which everybody thought would be a very rebuilding type of year for this team.
Yeah, I think my mind when I think about this season is when we heard about Steichen coming in and then we saw the schedule. Remember, Cody, the majority of people thought if this is a 6-win team, hell, even if this is a 7-win team, it would be a success because we just want to see this team improve. And I feel like we as Colts fans, a lot of times we're moving the goalpost because we had a situation where, as a team that from the media perspective said we would win 5, 6 games, maybe. And then here you are with 9 wins and a chance to make it into the playoffs, and still nobody in the media wanted to give you credit for what you were doing. It fed into a lot of what our expectations were at the end of the season for this team, rather than what we placed on them in the beginning of the season, which were the more realistic expectations. It is easily safe to say that the Colts have outplayed the expectations placed on them at the beginning of the year. This was not a team that was supposed to be fighting for a playoff spot, Cody. It was not supposed to be. By most accounts, people had Indy some people had Indy at the bottom. Some people had Indy placed at the bottom of the pile in this division. So for Indy to have had a chance to fight for the playoff spot and be in the position that they were in with everything that has happened, I think I think we have to come back to reality as fans and remind ourselves what we were thinking about with this team back in July rather than where we are now and saying that the season was not a success because we didn't make the playoffs. Remember, we were not supposed to be in this position to begin with. It just sucks that this is how it ends because when you outperform expectations, your expectations change as the time goes on.
Yeah, it's funny. I agree wholeheartedly with what you said about moving the goalposts. I challenge those people who would say this season that, it's so funny, Derek, because, everybody's up in their fields, like we talked about. We were up in our fields in certain ways as well. And so it's just funny to me because it's like you think of the people who are going out there and trashing Shane Steichen, trashing Chris Ballard, saying the season's a failure, blah, 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 blah. I almost want to ask every single one of you, how many of you had this team winning 10 games? Because if you had this team winning 10 games, then okay, it was a disappointment. But I guarantee you, 99% of you people who are saying this season is a failure, you had this team winning 5 or 6 games just like the rest of us. So let's not act like all of a sudden you were expecting this team. This isn't a team that anybody talked about playoffs with. Nobody we're talking about playoffs with. Even the most generous people are saying, yeah, this team's still got a couple years to go till they're serious playoff contenders. So if you're out here saying this team is a failure and you're number one of Shane Steichen just because they missed the playoffs, I don't know what to tell you because where are they I guess, how is it a disappointment if they are exceeding expectations? You know what I mean? Like you can't have both. You can't have on one hand this team being, you pick them to win 6 or 7 games or whatever, and they win 9. It's a disappointment because, okay, they exceeded your expectations. So I just don't understand that. I just truly don't understand it. I get the emotions of losing that game. You really wish you could have won in that big moment. But again, like in totality, this season was a very big success. And you did, in a wide margin, completely shatter all expectations. And so that's what I just talk about, like the expectations versus where the Colts ended up. Colts definitely exceeded expectations. So I don't think you can say that this season was a failure considering where we all thought this roster and this team and this franchise was in 2023.
Yeah, and honestly, besides a few people that truly did believe it, if you truly thought this team was going to win 9, 10 games going into this season, or even 10 games, I would say, and you want to sit there and say, press the panic button, then you truly weren't, you seriously did not truly believe it. I know you didn't. I mean, I had the Colts winning, I think, 8 games in my previous record prediction when the schedule came out. And that was me trying to be favorable. I didn't think they'd actually win 9 games. I thought there was a chance they could win 8, 9 games. I didn't necessarily think they would actually do it, especially with the situation with Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew and all these different things. I think that the main part of this is, again, the people are very up in arms over this. We hate how this season ended. But going back, Cody, again, from what is it about Indy that changed this year that makes you sit back and say that this team is better than what we saw in 2022? Or even if we want to talk going back the last 5 years, right? Let's think about that for a second. This team is probably one of the best teams in recent memory that we have. And why is that? Well, it wasn't because of the quarterback situation, right? When Indy had a really good quarterback, we were able to win a lot of games, but we didn't have a quarterback situation this year. But yet we were still in playoff contention with a backup quarterback, right? Your star running back misses the first 4 weeks of the season. Really, if you want to say the first 6 weeks of the season, because he really didn't get acclimated into the system until by week 7 at that point. So for the good chunk of the beginning of the season, you did not have Jonathan Taylor, right? But you still were able to get Zach Moss to be a boss for you this season. He was a phenomenal player, right? And then outside of Pittman, you did not have a true big wide receiver threat for you all season. I know Josh Downs had a relatively good rookie campaign, and Alec Pierce got major disrespect because of the inability of the quarterback to be able to ever find him in the first place. And then your star tight end, who you think will be your star tight end, in Jelani Woods, missed the entire season because of blowing out both his hamstrings. And that was supposed to be one of the big weapons for you to start this year, right? And then you had on the defensive side, you had injury after injury after injury in your secondary. Your secondary was probably the youngest secondary in the entire NFL by a long shot, Cody. There was a few weeks where everyone that was playing for the Indianapolis Colts in their secondary were all rookies or second-year guys, like literally. So Indy was so decimated with the situation that you have. But what did you improve upon? Your defensive line had the best sack-producing season in its entire franchise history. Your offensive line returned back to a top 10 offensive line form. I mean, by all accounts, I could even possibly say it was a top 5 from time to time. You were still able to run the ball as efficiently as you ever have been able to. An offense that had only one real true wide receiver threat all season and a very inaccurate quarterback still was a top 12 scoring offense in the entire NFL this season, despite the limitations that your offense had. And with the inexperience of the defense, your defense still won you 4 straight games in the middle of the season when you went on a hot streak and started winning all those games. That was the defense that won you those games, not your offense. So I think that we need to take a step back and remind ourselves this Indy team did a lot of things in the face of adversity this year. And it's upon us to realize that if our secondary gets a year older, if our quarterback doesn't get hurt, and our star players don't get hurt, then this is a team that can win 10 or 11 games next year, be in the playoffs, and go fight for a championship. And I think that it's really not that far off, Cody, with Shane Steichen and this coaching staff.
And one thing you didn't even mention was your presumed number 1 cornerback got suspended and is cut from the team. And nobody could have anticipated that.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of adversity. But Derek, I think the thing that makes you excited about this team, you mentioned it, there's a lot of good things that happened this year. Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, Trey Sermon. You got a really good group of running backs that you feel very confident in. The offensive line, like you talked about, took a massive leap from where they were last year. And that in part was due to Bernard Ryman becoming a franchise left tackle. He was one of the better left tackles in the NFL. Will Fry's taking a jump up. And, obviously Ryan Kelly having a rebound year. Really all the offensive linemen who have been on the team having rebound years. You had, Braden Smith was out a good chunk of the year, so you had to rely on a rookie right tackle and Blake Freeland, who definitely had some up and down moments. But the big thing, Derek, that I look at is there was a ton of guys who had career years this year under Shane Steichen, right? We talked about it. Michael Pittman Jr., career year under Shane Steichen. We talked about Bernard Ryman, Will Fries, both career years under Shane Steichen. Ryan Kelly even had one of his best years under Shane Steichen. And on the defensive side of things, Samson Ebukam had nearly double-digit sacks on the year. Julian Blackmon, before he went down, he was having a career year. Kenny Moore, a resurgence. So a lot of different guys playing extremely well. I know I missed other guys, but that's just a few of the guys who had career years under Shane Steichen. And so that was definitely great to see. The fact that it definitely seems like Shane Steichen and this coaching staff were able to get a lot out of these players. And they did face a ton of adversity, which that makes you think like, okay, you get back and you add to some of these pieces that really were good for you. You add some more talent on both sides of the football. How much more could this coaching staff do with even more talent next year? So it's definitely exciting in that fact. And also you mentioned, getting Anthony Richardson back. If he can stay healthy, you feel really good about where your offense is, because Derek, if you had a quarterback that was willing and able to get the ball downfield consistently, how many more big plays would you have? I mean, it seems like we're routinely at this point, every single game, you see Alec Pierce wide open down the field and the quarterback just not seeing him. So I'm just excited for that fact that the Colts receivers, I felt like they did a good job all year. It's just, like you said, on the quarterback, really, he didn't get guys like Alec Pierce involved. There were times where he didn't get, like last night, he didn't get Michael Pittman as involved as he should have been. Josh Downs sometimes didn't get used how he needed to get used. So I think all those things make you feel confident that, with an off season where what you do well, some areas you need to improve on. I feel like, Derek, from what we thought with all the presumed holes in 2022 going into that off season compared to this off season, I feel like there's not nearly as many holes on this roster at all. You have a lot of good pieces in a lot of good areas, especially if you re-sign a couple key guys where you're like, we have a lot of things to like about our football team. And so, but yeah, you got to get back some of these key guys and have them at 100% for next year. And if they can stay healthy, like you said, I think the sky is the limit, man.
Yep, absolutely. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. That is us explaining why this 2023 season was, in fact, a success. Again, not the ending that we wanted. So at the end of the day, Indianapolis, they start getting older. They start getting some better players, and their players not actually getting hurt this year. And then you start seeing a much better opportunity for Indianapolis going into 2024. We will be having a bunch more videos up for you guys talking about it as well. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.